I'll never forget the way she said it. We were sitting at the dinner table, a small family gathering, just 8 of us. I had spent the whole afternoon cooking. I had followed her son's favorite recipes. I double-checked every spice, every step. But the moment she took the first bite, she dropped her fork, sipped her wine, and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can't cook." Just like that. No smile. No laughter. Not even a trace of sarcasm. Just cold, sharp words. I laughed nervously. Maybe she was joking. Maybe this was her odd sense of humor. But then she added, "I mean, thank God my son grew up eating real food. This is bland." I felt my heart drop. My cheeks flushed hot. My hands trembled slightly under the table. Everyone else went quiet. My husband gave me an awkward glance. But he didn't say anything. Not a word. That silence? It was louder than her insult. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. I wanted someone, anyone, to defend me. But no one did. Later that night, I cried in the kitchen while washing dishes. My own food. My own effort. Was I really that bad? Had I embarrassed myself? It wasn't just the food. It was her tone. The way she looked at me, like I was unworthy of her son, her standards, her kitchen. And that's when I realized, this wasn't about dinner. This was about control. And I had 2 choices, break down or rise up. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. She may think I can't cook, but one day, I'll show her exactly what I can do, with fire in my heart and spices she's never even tasted. After that humiliating dinner, I tried to let it go. I told myself she was just being old-fashioned, maybe even protective. But it didn't stop there. Every time I offered to help in the kitchen, she brushed me off. "You'll slow me down," she'd say. Or worse, "Why don't you just set the table? That's more your speed." Each word chipped away at me. What hurt most wasn't the rejection. It was the unspoken message. "You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough." Still, I smiled. I tried to win her over. I bought her flowers on holidays. I complimented her cooking. I even asked for her recipes. She'd always forget to send them. And my husband? He stayed silent. "I don't want to get between you two," he'd say. But I needed him to stand beside me, not hide behind the excuse of peacekeeping. Weeks turned into months, and I started pulling away, from the dinners, from the visits, from pretending I fit into a family that clearly didn't want me. But while she closed one door, I found another. One afternoon, I stumbled into a small local cafe. The owner, a kind older woman, was looking to retire and sell. The place was humble but warm, lined with old wood, the scent of cinnamon and fresh dough lingering in the air, and something clicked. What if I stopped waiting for her approval and started building something of my own? I didn't know how yet. I didn't have the full plan, but I knew this much. If she wouldn't give me a place at her table, I'd build a table of my own, bigger, warmer, and open to all. And one day, maybe she'd sit at mine. I couldn't sleep that night. That little cafe haunted my thoughts. The smell of warm bread, the handwritten chalk menu, the laughter of strangers who felt like family. It was everything her kitchen wasn't. Welcoming, kind, forgiving. The next morning, I walked back. The owner, Maria, was wiping down the tables. I asked her if she was still thinking of selling. She smiled gently and said, "I've been waiting for the right person." And then she handed me a cup of coffee, on the house. I took that as a sign. My heart was racing, but I said the words I wasn't sure I was ready for. "I'm interested. I want to run this place." She looked me in the eye and asked, "Can you cook?" I paused. I thought of all the times I'd been told I couldn't, of how my mother-in-law scoffed at me, how even my husband had doubts. But then I thought of the meals I made for myself on sad days, the cupcakes I baked for friends, the handwritten notes I included with every birthday dish I'd ever prepared. And I smiled. "Yes, I can cook." Maria laughed. "Then this place is yours, if you're willing to fight for it." I had no restaurant experience, no business plan, just a fire in my gut and the sound of her voice ringing in my head. "You can't cook." I didn't tell anyone at first, not even my husband. I knew they wouldn't understand. They'd say I was overreacting, that I was doing this out of spite. But it wasn't spite. It was healing. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice, my confidence, and maybe even my joy. That little cafe? It became my battleground, and I was ready to turn every insult into a recipe, every doubt into a dish. This wasn't just cooking anymore. This was personal. A week later, I stood in front of a notary with trembling hands and a pen in mine. The cafe was now officially mine. I had bought it, not with revenge in my heart, but with purpose. The paperwork felt heavier than any cookbook I'd ever held. It wasn't just a signature. It was a promise to myself, a contract with the version of me I almost let die under the weight of someone else's judgment. I walked into the empty cafe after the deal was done. The chairs were stacked. The sunlight filtered in through dusty windows. It didn't look like much, but to me, it looked like a second chance. I called it second serving, because that's what it was. A second serving of dignity, of courage, of everything I was told I didn't deserve. I spent the next few weeks pouring every ounce of myself into the place. I scrubbed tiles, painted walls, tried and failed at recipes. Bio cried over burnt pastries. Bonheur piocher laughed when I accidentally made something great out of a mistake. It was messy. It was exhausting. And it was mine. I used savings I'd tucked away for someday. Well, someday had come. I started small. Just one dish a day, handwritten on a chalkboard outside. A casserole my mother once made. A soup I created during a particularly rough winter. A pie that reminded me of the one I made when I first moved in with my husband. Each recipe was a memory, each meal a quiet rebellion, and people started coming in. First it was neighbors, then it was strangers, then it was food bloggers who said, "There's something raw and honest here." But I still hadn't told anyone from his side of the family, especially not her, the woman who told me I couldn't cook, had no idea I was now the owner of the best-reviewed cafe in the district. And soon, she was going to find out. But not the way you think. It was a Saturday morning. Rain tapped gently against the cafe windows. I had just finished setting out fresh scones, cranberry and orange, her least favorite combination. Funny how that memory stuck. The bell above the door jingled, and in she walked. My mother-in-law. She looked older, but still carried herself with that same stiff pride, chin high, eyes scanning the room like a critic at a gallery she never wanted to attend. Behind her was her sister-in-law and two other women I didn't recognize, probably friends from her book club or church group. They were here for brunch. I froze behind the counter. For a split second, I thought about hiding in the kitchen, but I didn't. I stood tall. I wore no apron, no chef's coat, just a soft sweater and my favorite jeans. No name tag, no clues, just me. She didn't recognize me. Not at all. She looked right past me, even when I said hello. She scanned the menu board and said to one of her friends, "This place is charming. Wonder if it's new." It had been open for almost 2 months. Her friend replied, "They say it's run by a young woman, self-taught, everything's from scratch." I watched her lips purse at the word self-taught. She ordered quiche and coffee. No complaints, until she took a bite. And then something strange happened. She paused, looked down at the food, then took another bite, and another. I couldn't help it. I walked over, heart pounding. "Everything to your liking, ma'am?" She looked up, and for a moment confusion flashed across her face. Her eyes narrowed, searching mine. Then it hit her. She blinked. Hard. "You." "Yes," I said with the calmest voice I'd ever used around her. "It's me." Her friends looked between us, puzzled. I continued, smiling warmly but firmly. "Welcome to Second Serving. I'm the owner. And yes, I made the quiche." There it was. The silence. The stunned, bitter silence of a woman who just realized the daughter-in-law she dismissed had built something beautiful without her. She didn't speak, just nodded stiffly and went back to eating. But I knew. In that moment, I had served her more than breakfast. I had served her truth. And trust me, she tasted every bite. That night, the house was quiet. My husband had just returned from a business trip, and we were finishing dinner when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "It's my mom." He picked up and put her on speaker, as he usually does when we're together. Transparency was something we'd promised each other, especially after the tension with his family. Her voice came through, crisp and tight. "You didn't tell me she opened a restaurant." There was no hello, no pleasantries. My husband gave me a quick glance, then responded with calm curiosity. "You never asked." "I walked in today," she continued. "Didn't even recognize her. She owns the place?" "Really? Since when?" I listened, arms crossed gently, wondering how far she would take it. "Since a couple months ago," he replied. "She worked hard for it. Every recipe, every detail, that's all her." There was a pause, then her voice turned sharp. "You should have told me. I looked like a fool." "Why would you look like a fool?" he asked, evenly. "You treated her like she was beneath you, like she didn't belong in your world, but now you've eaten her food, sat in her cafe, praised it, without knowing it was hers." Silence. Then came the dagger from her. "You always choose her over your family." And that was when I finally spoke up. Calmly. Clearly. "I am his family, whether you like it or not." The silence on her end was deafening. I continued, my voice steady. "You told me once I couldn't cook, that I wasn't good enough, but now you praise what I've built without realizing it was mine. Maybe it's time to ask yourself why you couldn't see it when it mattered." She didn't respond. She hung up. No goodbyes. No apologies. Just the click of a call ended too soon. My husband turned to me and reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was trying to prove anything. Not to her, not to him, not even to myself. I was just living my truth and letting it speak louder than her disapproval ever could. A week passed. Business at the cafe was steady. Locals were starting to notice us, returning for the cinnamon rolls, the espresso that didn't taste burnt, and the warm, cozy space that felt like a hug after a long day. I didn't think about my mother-in-law much until I read the review. It was posted on a local food blog that had thousands of followers in our area. A woman had written about her unexpectedly touching experience at a neighborhood cafe. She wrote about walking in with low expectations, how the food surprised her, how the staff were kind, and how she realized the owner was someone she had misjudged. "Sometimes," the review read, "we judge people not by who they are, but by who we expect them to be, and in doing so, we miss their brilliance." I almost missed hers. It wasn't signed with a name, but I knew. I knew it was her. The language, the guilt barely veiled in flowery phrases. She hadn't apologized out loud, but this was her version of saying, "I was wrong." I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just stood there, rereading that post 5 times while holding a coffee cup in my hand that had gone cold. For years, I had tried to get her to see me, to accept me, to even acknowledge my worth beyond what I could or couldn't cook, and here she was, finally realizing it not because I yelled or begged or proved her wrong in some dramatic fashion, but because she sat in my cafe, tasted what I built, and couldn't deny it anymore. Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, at least not yet, but relief, a softening, a release from the years of invisible weight I had carried just trying to be enough. I printed out that review, framed it, hung it next to the register. No one else knew what it meant, but I did. It was a reminder. Validation doesn't always come wrapped in the words we expect. Sometimes it comes in silence, in action, in a review left under an anonymous name. And in that moment, I finally let myself exhale. It was a Thursday afternoon when I saw her again. The cafe was halfway through the lunch rush. I was behind the counter, plating lemon tarts when the door chimed, and there she was, standing in the entryway like a ghost from a different life. But she wasn't alone. She had someone with her, A woman, maybe in her early 40s. Sharp suit, kind eyes. I immediately recognized her. She was a food critic from a major city magazine. My breath caught. My mother-in-law glanced around, as if trying to appear casual. Then she approached the counter and said, "This is the owner I was telling you about." She said it with pride, the kind of pride I had never heard in her voice when talking about me. Not once. I didn't know what to say. I just smiled politely and welcomed them in. The critic ordered nearly everything on the menu. My mother-in-law sat at a corner table, eating slowly. Watching, not criticizing, not whispering, just observing. When the critic came over to shake my hand, she said, "You've built something special here. I came because someone I trust couldn't stop talking about you." That someone was now quietly sipping chamomile tea, staring into her cup like it might say something back. When they left, my mother-in-law lingered. She walked back to the counter and said quietly, "I should have seen it sooner." I blinked. "Seen what?" She hesitated. Then, with the same voice she used to hum lullabies to her son when he was sick, soft, low, almost breaking, she said, "That you weren't trying to take anything away from me, you were just trying to build something of your own." It wasn't an apology. Not exactly, but it was the closest she'd ever come. And in that moment, I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need her validation anymore. She had already given me something more powerful. Respect. Earned, not demanded. As she turned to leave, she paused by the door and glanced back. "By the way," she said with a smirk, "your rosemary chicken? Better than mine ever was." And then, she was gone. But that sentence stayed, not because I needed her praise, but because, finally, it was her offering peace. And I had the choice to accept it. A week after that unexpected visit, something happened that brought this entire journey full circle. My husband came by the cafe after work, something he rarely did. He was always supportive, yes, but not overly involved. That day, though, he walked in with this look on his face, like he was seeing me for the first time. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking around, at the customers laughing over matcha lattes, at the hand-painted mural I'd added to the back wall, at the framed review his mother had left, still hanging proudly by the register, at me. He came over and hugged me, right there in the middle of the cafe. Not the quick, distracted hug of someone checking a box. No, this was a long, grounding kind of hug. The kind where someone is saying, "I see you, really see you." "I didn't realize," he whispered, "how much this meant to you, what you've built, what you've carried." I didn't know how to respond. For so long, I had been the one in the background. The wife who couldn't cook, the woman who wasn't enough, in his family's eyes. No, I wasn't just seen. I was respected. He sat down, ordered my lavender tea and a slice of apple tart, and watched me move behind the counter like I belonged there, like I had always belonged. We talked late into the night after I closed the cafe early. He told me how his mother had spoken to him, how she admitted she was wrong, that she had judged me unfairly, how she said I reminded her of herself, but stronger. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All those years of biting my tongue, trying to be accepted. And in the end, the acceptance came when I stopped trying to fit in and simply chose to stand on my own. I told him something I had never said aloud before. I never wanted to compete with her. I just wanted to be seen as someone who had something to offer too. He took my hand. "You are. And you always did. I just didn't realize how loudly you've been speaking this whole time. Through your food, your resilience, your heart." And in that moment, not in front of an audience, not in victory, but in quiet understanding, I felt something deeper than pride. I felt peace. After months of hard work, late nights, and second-guessing myself, the day finally came. The official grand reopening of the restaurant. Only, it didn't look anything like it used to. The stuffy formality, the outdated decor, the menus that hadn't changed in decades, all of it was gone. In its place was warmth, light, laughter. the smell of fresh herbs and homemade bread. I had renamed it Second Course because everyone deserves one. In food, in life, and in love. The sign outside was handwritten. The walls were filled with photos, not just of dishes, but of stories. Farmers we sourced from. Former employees who started their own cafes. Customers who had met over shared tables and now came in with their babies. And in the center of it all, there was me. Not the invisible daughter-in-law, not the woman who couldn't cook, but the soul of the space. The one who turned rejection into recipe, pain into power. People came. Lots of them. Some were curious, some supportive, and some, like my mother-in-law, came quietly, humbly, with a new look in their eyes. Not superiority, not skepticism, but respect. She didn't say much that night, just hugged me and said, "Your father-in-law would have been proud." It was the first time she ever mentioned him to me, without bitterness or distance. I think, in her own way, she had needed healing too. And maybe, this place, this rebirth, gave it to her. When I stood to give a small thank you speech, I looked around and saw faces that once doubted me, faces that now smiled, cheered, cried, and I said, "They say revenge is best served cold." But I disagree. I think healing, warm, slow, seasoned with love, is the most powerful dish of all. Thank you for giving me a second course and letting me serve it my way. The room erupted. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just heard. I was understood.